is James here with the Oracle Outlook for the week starting September the 9th, 2019. Thanks so much for tuning in and joining me for this week's video reading. This week I'm continuing to work with that modified weekly spread that I was inspired to work with over the last few weeks, and this time I want to give it a go using Kipper. And I'm going to be working with a Kipper deck that I haven't worked with in this space for some time, and that is Kipperono, which is by Paris Debono, and I will be leaving information about the deck in the description box below. So once again, I'm working with Kipperono by Paris Debono, and so now that I've set things up, let's get to the table and take a closer look at what Kipperono wants to say about the week ahead. And here we are with the cards on the table, and I'm going to take a few moments to shuffle the deck. And as I shuffle, I'm focusing on my intention for these weekly general readings, and that is for the information, for the insight, for the guidance and advice that is going to be most helpful and beneficial as we move through the experiences of the upcoming week. Feeling one more time will be good. All right. Now I'm going to go ahead and cut the deck. Fan the cards out. And now I'm looking for 8 cards in the fan that are getting my attention. Right, so now I'm going to take up the remainder of the deck, the cards I did not pick. And now I'm going to go ahead and count back to do my check. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, so the way that the spread gets laid out is that the first 3 cards get laid down and they represent the beginning of the week. I lay them in ascending order, going up. Then the 4th card goes at the top. And then the next 3 cards go in descending order on the opposite side. And then the final card goes in the middle at the bottom. And so the positions go as follows. Each of the 7 cards represents one day in the week. So I read these as the theme of the day, something we're being asked to focus and concentrate on for the day, or a specific situation in the day that we need to be mindful of. And then the 8th card here in the middle represents the overall theme and energy of the week, right? So each of the cards represents theme and energy for that particular day, and then this represents the week as a whole. So now, having said that, let's take a look. I usually start with the theme card. So here we have sorrow and tribulation. So this is a card that tells us that the overall theme and energy of the week could be that of stress. This is my stress card. So usually it represents facing some kind of adversity. So it's about getting through a possibly challenging week. You know, I also call this my headache card. So it may be that people are going to be dealing with literal headaches, right? And so this may be a nod to make sure that you are taking care of yourself in that regard. But it could also be that this is a week of metaphorical headaches. Right, so again, sorrow and tribulation is known traditionally as grief and adversity, and so for me, this card in one word usually represents stress, right? And so this is known as a down patch card, right? So keep an eye or be mindful of what it is that are your stressors, and with that in mind, how you cope with stressful situations and stress itself. Just personally speaking, I know that when it came to stress or stressful situations, I did not cope. I had what we call in the psychological world negative coping strategies. And so this may be a week for you to be more mindful or aware of how you cope with stress. What are your strategies? And could you maybe pick better coping strategies, coping mechanisms, in a positive sense? So I'll give you an example just so maybe you can think about how you maybe handle stress in your own world. But for me, and this is stress on the job mostly, but I had two things in my desk drawer when I was a manager especially. I had always a bottle of Excedrin for the headaches, right? Because I talked about headaches, right? Because I get lots of headaches on the job. And I had a box of Twinkies. So if people saw me reaching for a Twinkie, they knew that I was stressed out on the job. Or if I went to, because I worked in a grocery store at the time, so if I went to the bakery department and asked for yellow cake with cream cheese icing on it, because they would sell it either whole or by the slice. If I asked for a slice of that, because I didn't see it in the case, the people in the bakery knew that I was having a stressful day, because that was my way of coping. I would eat sweets as a way to cope with the stress. So that, and I realized that was a negative coping strategy or mechanism. So that is just to give you an idea of like thinking about how you choose to handle stress. Is it good? Is it not so good? Could it be tweaked? Could it be made better? All those kinds of things. But again, like I said before, this is about dealing with stress and stressful situations. So now let's take a look at the card that starts off the week with Monday. And here we have, false person, right? So false person is not typically known as a person card in the deck. It usually represents something that's wrong, something that's bad, or something that's some kind of mistake, right? So here we have a possibility that going with sorrow and tribulation, we may have the week going off to a start that's not so great, right? It may be highlighting a particular mistake or something being wrong or something being off to some degree, right? Now, if false person is a person, this could represent somebody who does not have our best interest in mind. Because this usually can represent someone who's insincere, if it's a person, someone who's insincere, someone who may be potentially hiding something. This is my card that can represent actors and actresses. So in the challenging sense, going with the idea that this represents somebody who may be insincere, somebody who is putting on a front or a false face, those kinds of things, a pretense. Now, in the more metaphorical sense, and this is a food for thought question, there may be something that starts on Monday, and the question is, what role are we playing in that situation, right? If I go back to my idea that this can represent an actor or an actress, they play a role or a part in whatever the production is, right? So if we go metaphorically that your life is a stage production, right, and that you are the producer and the director, then you could ask yourself, what role am I playing in this? What part am I playing in this? Basically, what's my contribution in this situation? And not in a way to blame yourself or beat yourself up or make yourself wrong, but just to facilitate a process of awareness, right? My idea when I read cards is not to assign fault or blame, but just to kind of plant seeds or facilitate a process of awareness, right? And so when a situation happens, we have had a role or a part to play in the situation. Right? So I'm seeing that now. I'm looking at the image and she's holding a snake. So the snake for me can symbolically represent entanglements or complications. So it could mean that there may be a complication or an entanglement on Monday that has to be dealt with, right? And then the last thing I will say is that this card for me, I tend to think with the image like a snake charmer, right? Somebody who handles snakes, right? So, as I'm saying the word handle snakes, so it could just be needing to handle a person who's like a snake, right? Think about like the snake in the grass or the viper kind of thing, right? So there may be that. And it could also be, somebody who is a snake charmer. So be mindful of, somebody who may seem a little bit too charming, right? Because there may be something wrong or something off with that. So it's making me think on Monday, be mindful of, the situations that you get yourself entangled in. Because it may be more complicated than you realize. And it may be a long and winding process in terms of disentangling, getting yourself out of the situation. So that's Monday. But it's making me feel like if we go back to the first card about sorrow and tribulation, about being stressed, it could be stress having to deal with some kind of mistake or some kind of error or something being wrong, right? And needing to handle that. So now let's take a look at Tuesday. And here we have Good Lady. Okay, so this is a person card where I said that false person doesn't always indicate a person. This card does. So Good Lady represents an older woman. And so the way that the story of Kipper goes is that you and I, so me being the reader and you being the viewer, we would either be represented by main person 1, which is a male card, or main person 2, which is a female card, right? So in relationship to that, this would represent somebody who's older, right? So now we have a person card here. So if we go back to the first card, false person, this would let us know that the possibility here is that the person represented by false person is actually Good Lady, and that would be a person who's not so helpful. Because in Kipper cartomancy, when false person is close to a person card, it usually represents somebody who is not as helpful as they could be. Because Good Lady by itself can represent a woman who's very helpful to the situation or to the person or to the individual, right? But when false person is this close to this card, it would represent the opposite, right? So if we're talking about, somebody who may be putting on a false face or a false front, it may be a woman who's older. So this could be an older sister. This could be a mother. This could be a maternal figure. This could be a woman who's in a position of authority. I tend to look at this as female authority figures. But the main thing about this card would be someone who's older than you and I. Now, going with the idea that this can represent an older woman, it could also be something having to do with a woman from the past. If you go with the idea of like old, and I think of like an ex, those kinds of things, right? So it may be, maybe the consequences, false person, of dealing with a woman in the past, and it's coming back, it's coming back up. Something about the situation is coming back up. If it's not like the person showing up directly on Tuesday, then it may be something having to do with a situation that involved this person in the past, right? But again, Good Lady would represent someone who's older. This would be the idea of like older and wiser, somebody who's more mature, somebody who's experienced. All that has to do with being older, right? But with false person, again, it would represent somebody who may not be as helpful, or maybe is not being as sincere as she could be. And so now I read with direction in mind. So she's literally looking at the next card. So let's take a look, pun intended, to see what this card is. So here we have, taking a look, Here we have winning lots of money. Okay, so this is an abundance card. So there may be something having to do with increase, because this card can represent a lot of something and typically can represent financial increase, right? So there may be on Wednesday a situation that may involve a lot of money. Now remember, if we go with the more challenging cards, sorrow and tribulation, there may be a stress about financial increase or stress involving a lot of money. And then false person would represent maybe something being wrong, bad, or some kind of mistake, and it involves money. Right? And then with good lady looking at this card or facing this card, it could represent that she may have a role or a part to play in that. Right? And so now if I go back to the idea that sorrow and tribulation is talking about stress, then this would be a lot of stress, right? On Wednesday. Wednesday has a potential to be very stressful, right? But it's making me feel like the stress may be about a financial increase or something having to do with a lot of money. Now, another meaning of this card for me, and this is based on other Kipper decks that I have with the illustration being something very different, is that Wednesday may be a day where we may have to consider taking a chance on something. This card for me can represent gambling. So this could be like taking a gamble or a chance or some kind of risk with something. And it's about like, if that's the case, if that resonates, and it's about like wondering or pondering or being maybe concerned about the odds. You know, what are the odds? Are the odds in your favor? You know, that kind of thing. You know, is it something that you're willing to take a risk or a gamble on? That type of thing. So as I lay the card down, like I said, good lady is looking at this card. So it's something about financial increase. It may involve a woman, you know, and then pairing the cards. False person would be concealing something, right? I read with direction in mind. So usually the cards that are behind the person on the card usually represents what's being concealed, right? So there may be something having to do with an older woman and money that's being concealed or being revealed, you know, that it was concealed, that kind of thing. So that's what I'm seeing. So again, winning lots of money can deal with financial increase, the possibility of a gamble or a risk, you know, taking a chance. But it could also be, you know, stress or an adverse situation that involves a lot of money on Wednesday. So now let's take a look at the card that represents Thursday. And here we have, so here we have military person. So military person, like false person, can represent a person or a situation. Here for me, if we're talking about the idea about a possibility of a stressful situation or a challenge involving money and lots of money, then this card as a follow-up could represent exercising some type of discipline. And here's why. Military person usually can represent somebody who enforces the law, so to speak. So this could represent somebody who, you know, has to follow some type of rule or rules or regulations. So that implies, you know, having some type of discipline, right? So if there is a situation involving money, the first thing that I would say is that there may be a need to exercise some discipline. This is about order, control, structure, along with the discipline, right? So it may be a message on Thursday in relationship to the cards that came before it about getting something under control, right? A need for control, a need for structure, a need to exercise some type of discipline, excuse me. The other thing here, if we're dealing with a person who may be challenging, good lady, next to false person, then this card is also about putting one's foot down, right? So there may be a situation where it gets to the point, especially if there's a lot of stress involved, there may be a need to put our foot down, right? And with that, maybe in the relationship, needing to set some kind of, like, the word that's coming to me, it's ground rules. You know, like, what are the rules or the terms of engagement? So that is my chief meaning for this card in this particular context with these cards. It may be a matter of exercising some discipline, putting our foot down, maybe needing to set some kind of rules with another person as a result of something that has gone wrong or some kind of mistake, and maybe, paying the consequences for that mistake. And this is the result. So that's what I see with this card on Thursday. So now let's take a look at how the week is going to start coming to a close, starting with Friday. And here we have, so now here we have work occupation. So this could be putting it in a context for some people that this may be a situation that has to do with the job. And remember, one of the things that I said with Good Lady is that she could represent somebody who's in a position of authority. So this could be a manager, supervisor, CEO, even somebody who's heading up or in charge of something or a department in the workplace for someone, right? And if that's the case, when I get this card coming after military person in that regard can represent somebody who's an employee on the job, because this card, or I should say the military person card that came before it, would represent somebody who wears a uniform, right? Or that the work could represent some type of service occupation, right? So in some contexts, this stressful experience could be dealing with someone on the job. And I would say with winning lots of money, it may be the type of work where lots of money is involved. So this could be somebody who deals with money, handles money, works in the financial sector or financial industry, like a financier or something of that nature, right? Or that money is involved in whatever the challenge is on the job, right? And so if that's the case, then winning lots of money usually doesn't represent like the pay that we get from work. So it could be something maybe having to do with the job, but winning lots of money would say it doesn't have to do with salary or pay or anything like that. It may be some other financial incentive or financial component or something of that nature. But when I see work occupation, this card represents one's job, what one does for work, right? Now, if it's not about a working situation or one's occupation in the literal sense, then this could be a situation that we have to work on, because this card can represent like being hands-on or physical activity or manual labor. So with that, it may be an activity or engaging in quote-unquote work, and with that we have to be hands-on, right? And that would make sense with the idea of military person representing exercising some type of discipline or getting something under control, right? And as I'm talking about that, I'm coming back to the idea about military person representing, rules and regulations. So there may be something that has happened on one's job in one's workplace where there may be instituting possibly some new rules or regulations for something that happened on the job, false person, right? It's making me feel like I'm seeing in my mind one of my favorite TV shows. It's now no longer on the air, but Scandal. So there may be, some sort of scandal in the workplace, work environment that's come to light. And as a result of that, there are some rules or regulations that are being changed. It's also making me feel like someone's bad behavior. I'm seeing one of my favorite spiritual life coaches, Iyanla Van Zandt, in my head, and she talks about people's bad behavior, right? So it may have been somebody acting inappropriately on the job, and as a result of that, it has created a situation where new rules and regulations are being instituted, right? But I'm seeing that with somebody's workplace. So there's two possibilities. So there may be a change in rules and regulations based on, bad behavior, or that there's something dealing with needing to work on finances because of something that was done in the past. And in both possible scenarios, an older woman or a woman who is in a position of authority may be involved. But on Friday, it's about, being hands-on and actively trying to work that situation out. So now let's take a look at the card that represents Saturday. And here we have, so here we have Good Boy. In traditional Kipper cartomancy, this is known as Rich Boy. And so this usually represents someone younger, whereas Good Lady can represent an older person. This would represent someone younger. So this could be a day where we're dealing with a younger person, a younger male in particular. Right? So this could be a son. This could be a younger brother, cousin, nephew. In the familial sense, it would be possibly a relationship like that. Or this could be dealing with a younger person on the job. Right? And interestingly enough, here we have a scenario. I'm going to put the card down because this is also a card, Good Boy, that can represent business, right? So here we have the possibility, because Good Lady is facing Good Boy, right? So this may have to do with an older woman and a younger man. And in this regard, this could be, if this is a supervisor, this could be an employee, and that would bring military person back into the picture too. Or this could be, discipline in the workplace that involves a younger man. Now, another possibility with Good Boy is that he can represent not just business, but he can also represent self-employment, right? So there may be something having to do with self-employment for a person, especially with work occupation, right? So somebody could be wanting to make the shift from, being an employee on the job to being self-employed. And with that, then let's go back to military person. If that's the case, then it may be like, what's the structure going to be for your self-employment venture? That could be the thing where you're going to have to be really hands-on, work occupation, and exercise a great deal of discipline, right, in order to make that business go forward. I'm looking at the image. He's standing next to a bike, and so the bike would represent movement. But the bike is also a symbol of balance, right? So maybe this message would be, how can we create more balance, or how can we, get things into balance, right? And so that brings me to the secondary meaning of this card. It can usually represent money and finances. So here we had winning lots of money, and now we have another card that can represent money, right? So with that, the bicycle, I talked about it being balanced, and this could be, balancing money, working on balancing money, getting money into balance. So this could be like balancing the books, doing accounting, bookkeeping, things of that nature. For some people, it could be a matter of taking a look at investments. Remember, I talked about, financial people who work in the financial industry or financial sector. So this could be maybe, especially with winning lots of money, because I talked about the idea about that doesn't represent pay. That would represent, something in addition to that or aside from that. So this card would make me feel like maybe dealing with somebody who handles money. This really is a person who handles money, right? But it could be a matter of, somebody who does accounting, bookkeeping, who's a financier, maybe who's an investor or a trader. And another possibility going with work occupation may be for the people who are experiencing stress around money. It could be a matter of How can you create an energy where you're seeing your money work for you rather than you working for money, right? And then if we go with the more metaphorical, with this idea about money, money is energy, right? So we invest money and we spend money. So the more metaphorical food for thought question could be, where are we investing our time and energy? Are we getting a return on that investment of our time, energy, and resources even, right? And then the other one is, how are we spending our energy, right? Because again, going with the bicycle on the card, towards the week's end, there may be a greater need for balance, right? And as I said that, as I'm talking out loud, the cycle could represent, or the bicycle rather, could represent a particular cycle, going through a cycle or cycles, because there's two wheels on the card, right? So if we are going through a stressful time, dealing with adverse conditions or situations, this card may be giving us the message that to consider the fact that it's a cycle, right? Everything goes in cycles, right? And so with the idea that that will pass, right? It may be just a matter of working your way through it, right? So again, good boy could represent an actual person, and that would be somebody who's younger, or somebody who handles money or works with money, or somebody who's considering self-employment. So that is a card that represents Saturday. So now let's take a look at the final card, rounding the reading out. And here we have, so here we have the expectation card. So this is a card that turns up to represent being patient. This is a card that represents waiting. So this card represents anticipation, waiting for something in the future. This is also a card that talks about our needs, our wants, and our desires. So if we go with the idea that, I'm going to put the card down just for a moment and read them straight down, that the cards may be talking about needing to work out something, either with a younger man or with money, and that there may be a waiting period or a need to be patient in the process. Right? This is known as a cause and effect card, so if I read it the other way around, then this may be, a process where patience, we're waiting on something, we're anticipating something, and it may affect or have an effect on a younger person, or on business, or with money, that kind of thing. But it makes me feel like maybe money is anticipated or desired or needed, right? And then again, because the woman on expectation, right, she's looking to the left, which is, looking ahead, but she's facing these cards, right? So remember, these are the challenging cards. So we had a couple of challenging cards this week, right? So again, it's just making me feel like if there is something of a challenging nature, some sort of adversity, it may be a matter of working through it. I'm going to go back to the work occupation card, needing to work through it, and then there's going to be something having to do with waiting, right? And maybe that the possibility here, we have a timing card here. So for me, the expectation card can represent 3 months. I call it the 3 months patience card. So there may be something that's unfolding that you may experience this week, but there may be something that goes beyond the week itself in terms of waiting for a resolution or an outcome, right? And it could even be that the waiting itself is stressful, right? Because the woman is facing this card, right? But it makes me feel like there may be an experience about a mistake in the past, and that it's coming up for us to work through it, and there may be a waiting period at the end or towards the end. But it could just be as a general message for all of us. It's about how can we exercise a greater sense of patience this week, right? We may be getting stressed out because something may be taking longer to unfold or resolve than we would like. And so how can we kind of maybe take a different look or change our view or outlook on that, right? Because this is, for me, can represent a change in outlook or a change in view. So there may be something that requires us to shift or change our outlook. And so on that note, I will go ahead and end the reading here. I'm Jameson Mitchell, and I'd like to thank you for sharing space here with me for this week's video reading, and I look forward to sharing the same space with you again in our next video reading together. So until then, I'm hoping that you have a wonderful day, and I'm hoping that you have the best week possible, despite any challenges or adversities that come your way. Take care.